In 2023, the internet was captivated by a bizarre spectacle unfolding in the Nevada desert. Videos, shared by the millions, showed a scene that defied all logic. Farmers were dumping truckloads of living creatures onto barren, salt-covered ground. The creatures were bees, and the ground looked more like a Martian wasteland than a farm. The reaction was swift and brutal. Agricultural experts called it a cruel and pointless stunt. Environmentalists predicted a mass die-off. Neighbors were convinced the farmers had finally lost their minds. The story became a national punchline, a textbook example of misguided agriculture destined to fail spectacularly. But they were all wrong. What the world was mocking as a disaster was, in fact, the final, desperate move in a high-stakes gamble. This wasn't an act of madness. It was a calculated shot in the dark to solve a crisis that was silently killing Nevada's farms. And beneath the surface of this salted earth, a secret was about to be revealed that would change the world of agriculture forever. To understand why farmers would intentionally pour millions of bees onto a salt flat, you first have to understand the ground beneath their feet. Nevada has always been a difficult place to grow things, but by the early 2020s, the situation was becoming critical. A silent crisis was poisoning the land. The soil was becoming increasingly alkaline, choked with mineral deposits left behind by ancient, evaporated lakes. This salty soil was toxic to most conventional crops. Farmers were locked in a losing battle, spending fortunes on soil amendments only to watch their yields drop year after year. Their way of life was on the verge of collapse. But one plant defied the odds: alfalfa. With its deep roots and resilience, this purple-flowered crop could thrive where others withered. More importantly, alfalfa was a cash cow, not for its hay, but for its seeds. Alfalfa seeds were incredibly valuable, but they came with a biological puzzle that had stumped farmers for decades. The alfalfa flower is not a passive bloom. Its petals form a unique, spring-loaded mechanism that holds its pollen. To pollinate the flower, this mechanism must be tripped with precise pressure, causing it to snap forward and dust the pollinator. It's a biological lock, and most bees don't have the key. Honeybees, the workhorses of industrial agriculture, find the snapping action uncomfortable. They learn to avoid it, stealing nectar from the side of the flower without ever tripping the mechanism. The result? Fields of beautiful purple flowers that produced almost no seeds. Farmers were watching their most valuable crop fail, not from drought or disease, but from a pollination mismatch. They needed a new pollinator, and the answer was not in the lab, but buried in a dusty corner of history. Dr. Clara Martinez, an entomologist, was digging through old agricultural research when she found it, a forgotten 1970s study on a native Nevada bee species that seemed almost too good to be true: the alkali bee. Unlike honeybees, alkali bees are solitary ground nesters. They don't build hives. They engineer subterranean homes, each female digging her own network of tunnels and chambers. And crucially, the old research noted they thrived in the exact salty, alkaline soil that was killing Nevada's crops. But it was their relationship with alfalfa that made Dr. Martinez's heart race. The alkali bee was nature's perfect key for alfalfa's lock. Its size, weight, and behavior were perfectly adapted to trip the flower's mechanism every single time. Where a honeybee failed, the alkali bee succeeded, welcoming the pollen explosion. The problem was, decades of pesticide use and habitat loss had driven the native alkali bee to the brink of extinction. Dr. Martinez realized that if farmers could recreate the bee's native habitat, they could bring them back and solve their crisis. She proposed a radical idea: intentionally engineer salty, moist plots of land to serve as massive, artificial bee colonies. The concept was so outlandish that most farmers laughed her off the phone. Intentionally salt your own land? It sounded like agricultural suicide. Only a few, like farmer Bill Richardson, were desperate enough to listen. Facing bankruptcy, he agreed to turn a 5-acre plot of his farm into a test site for Dr. Martinez's wild theory, unknowingly setting the stage for a media spectacle. The preparation was an operation of strange precision. First, the soil was tilled to a specific consistency, loose enough for digging, yet stable enough to prevent tunnel collapse. Then came the part that went viral. Truck after truck dumped tons of salt, which workers spread across the field. To an outsider, it looked like they were trying to sterilize the land forever. Beneath this salt crust, Bill installed a secret weapon, a complex, subterranean irrigation system of pipes and sensors designed to maintain the perfect moisture level deep within the soil. It was an expensive, invisible network that critics mocked as a colossal waste of money. Finally, the bees arrived. Millions of alkali bees, carefully bred at a specialized facility, were poured onto the salt-crusted field. The world watched, laughed, and waited for the inevitable failure. But while the world was laughing at the surface, an unseen miracle was unfolding below. The bees everyone assumed would die or flee were, in fact, building a civilization. Within days, female bees began to dig. The salt crust, which seemed so hostile, acted as a protective barrier, preventing the tunnels from drying out and deterring parasites and predators. It was the perfect roof for their underground city. Each bee excavated a vertical shaft, descending 12 to 18 inches before branching out into horizontal chambers, like a subterranean apartment complex. Inside each chamber, the female created a nursery. She would provision it with a mixture of pollen and nectar, lay a single egg, and seal it off. The salty, alkaline soil provided a naturally sterile environment, protecting the developing larvae from fungal diseases. Bill's hidden irrigation system maintained the precise humidity needed for survival. This wasn't just a patch of dirt. It was a self-sustaining, self-replicating bee metropolis. 3 weeks later, the true test began. Dr. Martinez's monitoring equipment revealed something astonishing. The alkali bees were pollinating the alfalfa with an efficiency that defied belief. An alkali bee could successfully pollinate up to 300 flowers a day. A honeybee might manage 50. Furthermore, the alkali bees achieved nearly 100% successful pollination events on the flowers they visited. They worked longer hours, tolerating the intense Nevada heat that sent other bees back to their hives. The 5-acre bee bed was servicing over 150 acres of alfalfa, with bees being tracked foraging far beyond the textbook range. But the real proof would come at the harvest. When the harvest numbers came in, the mockery fell silent. The results weren't just good, they were statistically impossible. Bill Richardson's fields produced an average of 1,850 pounds of alfalfa seeds per acre. The state average for farms using traditional methods was between 600 and 800. The bee beds had nearly tripled his yield. The economic impact was immediate. The experiment had increased his annual revenue by over $2.5 million. The farmers who had laughed were now begging for the secret. As news of Nevada's success spread, a predictable wave of imitation began. Farmers in California, Utah, and Colorado rushed to copy the strategy they had once ridiculed. They bought alkali bees, salted their fields, and waited for the profits to roll in, and they failed. Miserably. They learned a hard lesson. This wasn't just about dumping bees on salt. California's soil composition was wrong. Utah farmers ignored the critical subsurface irrigation. Colorado's altitude and climate were unsuitable for the Nevada-adapted bees. They had copied the recipe but missed the soul of the science. The so-called crazy bee experiment was actually a complex, elegant system born from a deep understanding of a native species and its environment. Today, Nevada's alfalfa seed industry is a 400 million empire, built on the back of a tiny, forgotten bee. University research confirmed that some of these man-made bee beds now support populations of over 8 million bees and have been self-sustaining for decades. The state that was once an agricultural punchline has become a global center for pollination innovation, all because a few desperate people were willing to trust a crazy idea. The story of the alkali bee is a powerful reminder that sometimes the most advanced solutions aren't found in new technology, but in rediscovering the profound, intricate wisdom of the natural world. It begs the question, how many other solutions to our most complex problems are not waiting to be invented, but are simply waiting to be rediscovered, hidden in plain sight, right beneath our feet?